So it's been a big couple of weeks for manga. MHA has come to a close, JJK is mere chapters away from its end, and Chainsaw Man is currently hitting the climax of its end battle of Part 2. And while it might feel a bit like everything's happening all at once, as it currently stands with both JJK's final battle and MHA's final battles done and dusted, Chainsaw Man now has the opportunity to take center stage with the only light directly on them. Except for the fact that Kaiju number 8 is also in its biggest ever possible final battle. But that doesn't necessarily coincide with the point I'm trying to make, so we're gonna ignore it. However, what does coincide with the fact that I am trying to make is the fact that Chapter 176 served us up one of the craziest twists we've ever seen in Chainsaw Man, and while we do have to wait another 2 weeks to get a new chapter, after chapters like these, you can hardly be upset about that. See, because while I do adore Kaiju number 8, if I'm being entirely real, right now, Chainsaw Man has the entirety of my undivided attention. This gigantic battle that's taking place between the black, no-eyed Chainsaw Man, the remnants of the Chainsaw Man Church, Fami, Asa, and the special divisions from the Public Safety Division has probably been the best thing that we've been served in Part 2. And this chapter was no different. See, this chapter served us up a little exposition about how Asa and Yoru's abilities have developed, how they've gotten stronger, what Yoru's motivations are for defeating Denji or the Chainsaw Devil, and also taught us a bit about how devils are created, about how devils come to be, and most importantly than anything, how the creation of devils ties back to Yoru, the war devil, in a big, scary, and incredibly poignant way. See, outside of giving us a massive amount of exposition, this chapter was just the flat-out hype. And while not a huge amount happened, the battle between Denji and Yoru and Asa is now on level ground, or at least so it appears. And thus today we got a fair amount to talk about, because today we're talking chapter 176 of Chainsaw Man Explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you want to see me try to bring real life challenges to the anime world, go ahead and follow the brand new channel that I created with Stephen He, Chris Barnett, and Danny Mata called Anime IRL. Or if you just want to hear me talk about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So, Chapter 176 of Chainsaw Man does not start off where Chapter 175 left off. As you'll recall, Chapter 175 was not a great chapter for the anti-Chainsaw Man forces, as everybody from Katana Man to Yoru to the aging devil, yes, a primal devil, had their arms cut off by Denji. And when you tie this into the fact that everyone is walking around without a mouth currently, not only is Denji / the Chainsaw Man in a position where they physically cannot throw up the devils they've consumed, but also nobody's got the requisite tools to make him do so. And thus Chapter 175 ended with Chainsaw Man looming over a nearly defenseless Asa as she was down on one knee, looking up with no arms to fight back. And thus Chapter 175 made it appear as though that it was wraps for Asa or Yoru. And once again, Denji's love interests was going to be scattered to the wind by Chainsaw Man adjacent politics. I guess we could hardly say Makima killing Reze was Chainsaw Man adjacent politics, but it was close. Regardless, whether or not Asa was going to survive this encounter against Chainsaw Man, it appears as though Denji's not going to be reliving the alley incident anytime soon. Unless Chapter 176 does something about that. See, Chapter 176 starts in an entirely different setting, with Asa sitting in the bath, presumably in her home. Now, obviously, this is a flashback, because in this scene, Asa has one arm, and she's reaching for with her one arm towards some soap. Now, this soap is outside of her reach, and yet she's opening up her hand as if to use the force to pull the soap to her. And surely enough, the soap flies to her, but when it flies into her hand, it turns into a blade. Yoru, who's in control at the moment, looks at this and says, "Soap sword." A sword made of soap. And it's at this point that Asa is revealed. She appears to be sitting across from Yoru in the bath. Now, obviously, Asa and Yoru are not separate. This is just a visual representation of the fact that they're having a conversation in the bath. Now, after seeing Yoru turn the soap into a blade, Asa chimes in and says, "I thought so. When I turned my apartment into a weapon, I didn't have to say its name." Yoru then chimes in by saying, "We can turn things into weapons without touching them or saying their names, though I don't believe that'll be enough to defeat Chainsaw Man." Now, this is important information perfectly depicted by the soap soap turning into a blade, because Yoru doesn't call out to the soap and she isn't touching the soap initially. The soap flies to her and turns into a weapon in her hand when it eventually reaches her. Now, if you remember, Yoru's idea by making Asa fall in love with Denji is so that when Asa and Yoru identify Denji as their boyfriend, Denji as an abstract possession of theirs would be able to be turned into a weapon. That's why when Asa went on her first date with Denji, she grabbed Denji by the neck and said Denji spinal cord sword. However, because either she or he didn't fully identify each other as owned by the other, this obviously didn't work. However, as more fear has been garnered towards the idea of war and Chainsaw Man, Yoru has gotten more powerful inside of Asa, and therefore this moment is supposed to show us that Asa and Yoru don't need to be touching the items they turn into weapons so long as they identify those things that they're turning into weapons as their own. However, either because they're not powerful enough yet, or because they don't truly identify Denji as theirs, and unfortunately that line of thinking implies even further to Chainsaw Man, who isn't Denji, that they believe that this won't necessarily help in the upcoming battle against Chainsaw Man. Now, the conversation between Asa and Yoru continues in the bath. As they say, not a day goes by without another killing being reported on the news by a pseudo Chainsaw Man. And Yoru identifies this as a slight problem. See, because while every single time a pseudo Chainsaw Man kills a civilian, the civilians of Japan are more and more afraid of the concept of war, as they are basically at war against the pseudo Chainsaw Man right now. All of these events also garner fear towards the idea of Chainsaw Man. And therefore, while Yoru, the war devil, is getting stronger every single day, so is the Chainsaw Man. And thus Asa asks Yoru, who's identifying the fact that Chainsaw Man may actually be too powerful to defeat, what if we just buried the hatchet? I mean, defeating Denji isn't going to make you happy anyways, right? And this comment seems to make Yoru dejected. However, Asa continues on, saying everybody remembers the terrors of war, just like you wanted. Can't you say you've already achieved your goal? But as Asa continues on, Yoru appears more and more dejected, until eventually she says, there's something I want to reclaim from Chainsaw Man. She continues by saying, my comrades were eaten by Chainsaw Man. If I can just make him vomit them up. Now, by comrades, it's not entirely clear who Yoru is referencing. See, we do have a somewhat comprehensive list of the devils that Pochita has consumed. Makima gave us a pretty good list in chapter 83, and then there was a couple of other isolated incidents where Pochita ate devils. But as it currently stands, we know that Pochita, and I'm gonna have to read these, has consumed the Nazi devil, the Arlone syndrome devil, which is a fictional disease, the World War II devil, the SOA devil, which is a fictional organization, the AIDS devil, the Mount Hio eruption devil, which is a fictional event, the nuclear weapons devil, the Sixth Sense devil, the Mind Child Breaker Starlight devil, which is a fictional entity, and then there's like the hybrid devil, the war devil partially, and obviously now the mouth devil. Now, while one would assume that the thing that Yoru wants Chainsaw Man to cough up more than anything else would be the part of her that exists inside Chainsaw Man, because that's why Yoru was weakened in the first place, it seems to be implied throughout this conversation that Yoru has returned back to her previous level of strength. So that may not be necessary. On top of this, we know that the 4 people that battled against Chainsaw Man in Hell prior to Pochita being revealed to Denji are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Those devils being the Famine Devil, the Death Devil, the Control Devil, and the War Devil. Now, these seem like the kind of people that Yoru would refer to as her comrades. However, all 4 of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are still alive. Kinda. Fami, the Famine Devil, was just eating sushi with them. Yoru is the War Devil. The Control Devil now did maybe just get killed, but is just in hell. And while yes, Denji did eat Makima, that wasn't Chainsaw Man, that was Denji. It's different. That's why Naota came back as the Control Devil, because the Control Devil was erased by Denji consuming Makima. And then last, but definitely not least, there's the Death Devil, who is alive and is a primal devil and has never been defeated and is therefore in hell. And we know that the Death Devil is alive because Fami and the Chainsaw Man Church are actively trying to make the War Devil and the Chainsaw Man as powerful as possible to defeat the Death Devil. So who does Yoru mean when she talks about comrades? Well, if I had to take a stab at it, I assume that Yoru is probably talking about the Nazi devil, the World War II devil, and the nuclear weapons devil, as those are all derivative concepts of the war devil. And that point is slightly strengthened by later events in this chapter. Asa then interrupts Yoru by saying, do you have any way to defeat Chainsaw Man? And Yoru continues in her dejection, muttering to herself the word 2. There are 2 weapons that I could make that would be far more powerful and fearsome than anything you could ever make. Asa then yells at Yoru and says, well then why didn't you use those in the first place? I gave up my home and my college fund to make weapons. But Yoru looks up during her rant and says, don't compare mine to such trifling things. Turning those 2 into weapons would run counter to saving my comrades. At which point Asa makes a real good suggestion and says, well then just stop. And it's this point that Yoru goes to say something, and then stops herself, further looking dejected like earlier. And it's at this point that Yoru's true intentions are revealed. And they're about as childish and selfish as one could imagine. As Yoru yells at Asa, "But I want to defeat Chainsaw Man. I want to prove that I'm the more fearsome devil. I'd give anything for that." And it's this point that we smash cut back to Yoru, standing on one knee, as Chainsaw Man is about to plunge 2 chainsaws into her chest. And as the Chainsaw Man is winding up to finish off Yoru, we see the echo of the last 2 words that she said in the path. For that. We then cut to Yoru, who has a chainsaw flying in towards her skull, as she thinks, "Would I turn my own children into weapons?" We then see in a moment of clarity, as her eyes brighten, she says, "Well, I guess that I would." We then see Yoru think, not say, because mind you, she doesn't have a mouth, "Come to mother. Tank. Gun." Now, this is obviously why in the beginning of this chapter, the exposition was given to us that Yoru would be able to make weapons without saying their names out loud. Because as it currently stands, nobody on Earth has the ability to say anything out loud. So if her power was contingent on that fact, she wouldn't be able to call the tank or gun devils. This also reveals something very interesting to us, that Yoru is the mother of the tank and gun devils. Now, obviously, this isn't the craziest concept of all time, but it does kind of flip our concept of how devils are created on its head. See, previously to this moment, we understood the creation of devils as simply, if something is feared, a devil will appear. If I for some reason gained an irrational fear of this SD card reader, an SD card reader devil would appear somewhere. However, that may not be the case. While it's obviously never been fully explained how devils do come to be, Yoru referring to the tank and gun devils as her children seems to imply that larger conceptual devils, like war and death and famine and control, will give birth to offshoots like World War II, Nazis, nuclear weapons, tanks, guns. And whether that's an actual physical birth for every single one of these devil offshoots that are created from these larger conceptual fears, or just because these offshoots tie their conceptual fear back to the larger entity that would be the thing that they're an offshoot from, and therefore they enter some kind of parent-child relationship with the larger conceptual fear, it appears as though a parentage line does exist amongst devils. And this actually makes a fair amount of sense. See, so far as we know, all of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are women. Yoru is a woman, Makima was a woman, and Fami is a woman. Now, obviously, we've never seen the Death Devil, and so we can't say whether or not the Death Devil is a woman. It would appear as though larger conceptual devils are women so that they can create offshoots of smaller, more derived fears. Now, well, the logical retort to that point would be, okay, well then what about the Darkness Devil, or the Falling Devil, or the Aging Devil? Well, yeah, primal devils don't appear to show much in the way of gender. While I definitely could make the argument that the Falling Devil is a woman, it seems as though primal devils rarely take a human form. Now, you could obviously make the argument that the War Devil, prior to joining with Asa, barely had a human form. It actually more looked like Grimace than anything. Yoru, who's in charge of the Yoru-Asa combination right now, is saying, "Come to mother, tank and gun," which seems to imply that the War Devil is the mother of the tank and gun devils. And while Yoru was in the bath talking to Asa about how she had 2 weapons that could defeat Chainsaw Man, she implied that turning the tank and gun devils into weapons would run counter to her want to save her comrades. This could seem to imply that the comrades that were consumed by Chainsaw Man, the World War II devil, the Nazi devil, and the nuclear weapons devil were also children of Yoru. But that still leaves us with the lingering question of what's going on with the primal devils. Does that mean that in some way or another that every single devil is an offshoot of the Death Devil? As genuinely all fears tied themselves back to the fear of death? Does that mean that the Darkness Devil is the mother or father of millions of devils? Or does this parentage thing only apply to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? We can't necessarily say. But as war has an incredible amount of derived fears, it's safe to assume that if anybody is responsible for the creation of hundreds, if not thousands of devils, it's probably Yoru. And the 2 strongest of the devils that she's created are apparently the Tank Devil and the Gun Devil. At least the strongest of the devils that aren't currently inside of Chainsaw Man's stomach. And thus, after Yoru calls on her 2 children, we smash cut to the Gulf of Mexico, where we see what seems to be an American devil containment facility, standing isolated in the middle of the ocean. Then cut to the inside of this devil containment facility to see a massive vault, guarded by 6 armed guards. However, on the next page, a giant hole is punched through this vault's door, and it's revealed that now the inside of the vault is empty. Now, I assume that's the Tank Devil because the Gun Devil is split amongst a ton of different locations. See, the last time that we saw the Gun Devil was chapter 75 of the manga, when the American president decided to give 1 year of every American citizen's lives to the Gun Devil to send the Gun Devil to go kill Makima. Now, mind you, this was only 20% of the Gun Devil because only 20% of the Gun Devil is owned by America. However, 28% of the Gun Devil is owned by the Soviets, 11% of the Gun Devil is owned by the Chinese, 4% by other countries, and 37% is owned by other devils. This is why Aki was going around trying to collect fragments of the Gun Devil from the devils that he killed. Now, this means that the Gun Devil that Makima and Denji pseudo-defeated from chapters 75 to 79 of the manga was only the 20% of the Gun Devil that America owned. And still, with only 20% of that Gun Devil's power, Makima had to use all of the weapons at her disposal to gain a narrowly fought victory. I mean, she had to use Angel, Aki, and numerous other members of the Special Division Forces. And even then, the 20% that she was battling against was able to take over Aki's dead body and knock on Denji's door as Aki 47, the Gun Fiend. Now, this conclusion that the Tank Devil was the one busting out of the Gulf of Mexico Devil Containment Facility is also slightly confirmed by the fact that on the next page, we see Mount Elbrus in the Soviet Union. Russia is still the Soviet Union in Chainsaw Man. And we see the side of Mount Elbrus explode, most likely referencing the fact that the 28% of the Gun Devil being held by the Soviet Union was being held in this mountain. We then cut back to what should be the end of Yoru's life by way of beheading by chainsaw. And yet all we see is Chainsaw Man being launched backwards as the two hands that were about to decapitate Yoru fly off his body. And we now see Yoru with two hands making the sign of a gun. On top of this, rather appropriately, she shoots Chainsaw Man directly in his stomach, blowing his guts all over the next panel, and amongst those guts is the head of the Mouth Devil. And because of this, we see in the final panel of this chapter, Yoru slightly smiling with her newly found mouth. On top of this, Yoru reveals that her two newfound arms are actually the weapons created from her children, the right gun gauntlet and the left tank gauntlet. Now, these gauntlets more look like frilly lace gloves pulled over an arm, but at the very least they have returned arms to Asa and Yoru. And it appears as though Yoru now has access to a move we've only ever seen be used by Makima. Makima so lovingly referred to power specifically as Bang. Now, it's hard for me to differentiate how the tank and gun gauntlets will work separately, as I can't imagine that the finger guns will be all that different between tank and gun, but all that really appears to matter is that Yoru now has enough strength to very much injure Chainsaw Man. She not only blew the Mouth Devil out of his guts, but also blew off two of his arms, and thus the playing field has leveled. While it's rather obvious that Yoru with her right gun gauntlet has enough power to blow heads out of Chainsaw Man's stomach, she now that he's kind of spit up the Mouth Devil has the ability to free her comrades, which is apparently all she's ever wanted and the whole reason she wanted to kill Chainsaw Man. However, in pursuit of that desire, she had to kill what could be assumed to be her two most powerful children, the Gun Devil and the Tank Devil. So somewhere, Aki got what he always dreamed of. Now, as to whether or not he wanted the Gun Devil to be turned into a gauntlet to be used by its mother to battle against Denji, we can't really say. But no more Gun Devil. At least no more Gun Devil for the Soviets. We can't necessarily say if it's the entirety of the Gun Devil being used in this gauntlet. However, I can't imagine for any reason that Yoru would only gain access to 28% of the Gun Devil. What's truly crazy about all of this, however, is that if Yoru is using 100% of the Gun Devil, that gauntlet is 5 times stronger than the thing that Makima required all of her strength to defeat. And if Chainsaw Man is able to go toe-to-toe with that level of strength, then Makima's obsession with Chainsaw Man and controlling him would make a fair amount of sense. And thus, while this chapter served us up some of the most hype moments we've ever seen in Chainsaw Man, it also made a whole lot of the story make sense. And that's why I genuinely believe chapter 176 is one of the best chapters we've ever gotten from Fujimoto. But how do you guys feel about this chapter? How'd you feel about the exposition given, the plot twists, and the new arms of Yoru and Asa? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I've been filming too much this week. My voice sounds grumbly.